In the house of my childhood, there was always one locked room. My parents forbade me even to look at it. After they died, I opened it. Inside was a nursery, spotless, as if someone was still waiting, and on the wall a name I don't remember, Leia. I hadn't been home in over 12 years, not since the night I left, bags in hand, vowing never to return to the creaking old house with its uneven floorboards and the strange silence that seemed to settle in every corner like dust. But now, after the accident that claimed both my parents, I stood on the cracked stone steps of the house I once called home holding the keys, my breath fogging in the cold evening air. The wooden door groaned open like something alive. Same scent, lavender with a hint of mildew. Same faded wallpaper in the hallway, patterned with ivy vines that looked almost real in the dying light. And at the end of the narrow corridor, almost glowing in memory, the red door. It hadn't changed, still sealed tight, still out of place. A deep, almost bloody crimson, unlike anything else in the house. My parents had always told me, sternly, never to open it, never even to touch the brass knob. That's not a room. For you, they'd say, their voices just a little too sharp, a little too rehearsed, but now they were gone, and the house was mine. I moved through the rooms slowly, as if walking through the belly of some sleeping animal. The kitchen still had the old kettle, the same tea stains in the sink. Upstairs, my childhood bedroom was untouched, posters peeling off the walls, dusty shelves, a stuffed rabbit slumped in the corner, all frozen in time, like the house had been waiting for me to return. That night, I didn't sleep. Something about the house, it felt aware, as if it noticed I was back. I'd hear creaks where there should be silence, a chair lightly scraping the floor below me, a door clicking softly shut. The house had a memory of its own, and it was waking up at 3:13 a.m. I found myself sitting up in bed. Why that time? I don't know. My phone screen glowed dimly beside me, displaying the digits like they meant something. 3:13, I could hear the faint ticking of the old clock downstairs, still working somehow after all these years, and then I heard it. A sound I had forgotten, or maybe tried to forget. A soft musical chime, notes rising and falling in a lullaby rhythm, distant, like coming from behind a closed door. A tune I didn't recognize. And yet something inside me shivered, as if my bones remembered even if my mind didn't. I stood, barefoot, drawn toward the hallway. The red door was at the far end, past the bathroom framed by shadows. And as I walked closer, I noticed something strange. The light beneath it, a faint, warm glow, like someone had left a lamp on inside. My breath caught. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating. The brass was cold, too cold. I pulled my hand back instinctively, suddenly aware of the tightness in my chest. Why was I afraid? There was no reason to be. The house was empty. My parents were gone. The past was buried. And yet, I backed away. Not tonight, not yet. Instead, I returned to my room, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Watching the darkness shift along the walls, waiting for the sun to rise, my hand kept drifting to the small silver locket around my neck, the one my mother gave me on my 10th birthday. I'd never opened it. She told me never to, just like she told me to never open the red door. Funny how grief makes rules feel less sacred. In the morning, I found a note. It hadn't been there the day before. Of that, I was sure. It was folded neatly on the hallway table outside my room. No envelope, no handwriting I recognized. Just a single sheet of yellowed paper with 4 words written in pencil. She's still in there. My skin turned to ice. The paper trembled in my hands. That was the first day I seriously considered leaving again, but something stronger kept me rooted in unease. A need to understand what my parents had hidden. Who was she? Why was the door locked my entire life? Why were my memories of that side of the house so patchy? And why was I starting to remember a name? A name that didn't belong to anyone I'd ever known? Lee. It took me 2 more nights to gather the nerve each evening. The house seemed more alive, more ... reactive. I'd walk down the hallway and feel a sudden drop in temperature near the red door. A low hum beneath the silence. The lullaby played again at 3:13 a.m., faint, mechanical, like from an old music box just barely working, and always that name drifting in and out of my mind. Lee. I didn't tell anyone I was back. There was no one to tell, really. The lawyer had called, asked if I'd cleaned the house yet. I told him no, not yet. I wasn't ready because the house wasn't just filled with dust, it was filled with ... questions. On the 3rd night, I stood in front of the red door with the same keyring that opened the rest of the house. I hadn't tried the keys yet. Part of me still feared what I'd find. But I needed to know. There were 6 keys. The 5th one clicked, a soft, heavy sound, not like a lock unlatching, but like a long breath, finally being exhaled after years. of being held in. A door creaked open, slow and deliberate, as though it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside was a nursery, perfectly preserved. A rocking chair sat in the corner, its wood polished and pale. A crib stood in the center, covered with a pink canopy. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, faded rabbits, bears, a unicorn with one missing eye. A mobile hung above the crib, still spinning slightly from some unseen draft, chiming the lullaby I'd heard for nights. The walls were a soft blush, decorated with hand-painted stars and clouds. A wooden dresser held a changing mat, powder, lotions, long since dried and cracked. Everything looked untouched, but not abandoned, not forgotten. More like ... paused. My feet moved without thought. I stepped into the room, half expecting the floor to give way, or some unseen force to shove me back. But nothing happened. Just that eerie, impossible stillness. Then I saw it on the far wall, above a row of baby photographs. Most too blurry to make out, there were painted letters, delicately curved and colored in soft gold. Lee. The name hit me like ice water. My knees weakened. I knew that name, not just vaguely. I knew it, like a song from childhood. Something I used to hum in sleep. Something familiar, buried so deep I'd convinced myself it never existed. I stumbled backward and sat heavily in the rocking chair. It creaked under my weight, but I didn't care. My hands trembled as I scanned the room. Who was she? Why had my parents hidden this place? Why did it feel like I was supposed to remember it? I stood and walked to the crib. Empty. The mattress was clean, sheets folded with care. No dust. I reached out and touched the fabric. It was warm. I froze. A shadow moved behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just the open door. Hallway behind it lit by the weak sun trying to break through gray skies. I stepped to the dresser, opened a drawer. Inside, a hairbrush with strands of fine dark hair, a pacifier, a tiny pair of socks. Everything was real, and somehow, none of it belonged to anyone I knew. But there was one more thing, a framed photo on the shelf beside the crib. I picked it up and stared at it for a long time, unable to process what I was seeing. It was me, 7 or 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a baby in my lap, her tiny hand clinging to my shirt. Her face slightly turned, smiling mired hers. The back of the frame had a handwritten note. Anna and Lee. First cuddle. My heart dropped. I don't remember this. I should remember this, but I don't. And that's what terrified me most. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the photo frame clutched to my chest. The image of me and a baby Lee burned into my mind like an after-image from a dream I never knew I had. My heart beat too loud in the quiet of the house. The silence pressing in like wet fabric. Something was wrong. Not just with the house. With me. The next morning, I went looking for more. There was an attic above the second floor, a hatch in the ceiling I hadn't thought about since childhood. I dragged an old chair beneath it, pulled the rope, and the wooden stairs creaked down reluctantly. Dust spiraled through the air. The smell up there was sharp old wood, mothballs, and something sweetly rotting. Most of the attic was filled with typical junk, holiday decorations, boxes of books, old furniture covered in sheets. But in the far corner, I saw something that didn't belong, a small brown suitcase. It was locked, but the zipper had frayed enough that I forced it open with a screwdriver. Inside were old VHS tapes, at least a dozen of them, each labeled in careful handwriting, LEA 3 months, LEA, Crawling Lee, plus Anna X MAS 1999. I sat back on my heels, pulse pounding. Why hadn't I ever seen these? Why didn't I remember filming them? Why didn't I even remember Lee? I brought the tapes downstairs and dug through the living room until I found the old TV and VHS player tucked behind a cabinet. Dusty, but functional. I plugged it all in, slid in the tape marked LEA Crawling, and hit play. The screen crackled. Then came color. Then sound. My father's voice, younger, laughing. There she goes. Look at her. Go, Lee. The camera pans shakily to a baby girl, maybe 8 months old, crawling across the floor toward a stuffed bear. She squeals with joy. A moment later, a small child, me, unmistakably runs into frame, clapping her hands. Anna, be careful. My mother says off-screen gentle. The girl me leans over and hugs the baby. I stare at the screen, my mouth dry. This isn't a dream, it's proof. I wasn't alone as a child. I had a sister. Why would they erase her? Why did I forget? I pulled out more tapes. The one labeled Lee plus Anna shows us playing with blocks, painting with our fingers. In one clip, we're holding hands and singing some nonsense song. I'm laughing, but in the next one, things shift. The camera is on the floor, sideways. There's crying in the background, shrill, desperate. My mother's voice, muffled, frantic. No, No, not in there. You can't be in there alone. Something crashes. The tape cuts out. I stared at the blue screen for a long time. Thick nausea rolled in my gut. I fumbled to eject the tape, but it stuck. I had to pry it out. As I did, a small note slipped out of the VHS case. A piece of notebook paper. One sentence, written in pencil, shaking and uneven. We weren't strong enough to keep her out. I froze. Out of what? Out of where? Suddenly, the red door didn't feel like the mystery. It felt like the lock. I woke up in the armchair. The TV was still hissing blue, like it was listening. While making coffee, I caught movement behind me. Just the briefest flicker in the corner of my eye, an inch too far to the left. The kitchen chair was pulled out more in the reflection than in real life. I blinked. Now it matched. That's when I stopped thinking I was going crazy, and started thinking the house was playing with me that evening. I found myself drawn again to the nursery. Everything inside was untouched. Too untouched. No dust, no smell. Like someone had been keeping it clean, and sitting in the middle of the floor was a dollhouse, an exact replica of this house, down to the peeling wallpaper. Stood in the tiny nursery room. One was a woman in a pale blue dress, the other a small black-haired girl. Familiar about her? On the back of her head, and saw the reflection in the glass of the display case nearby. The doll was still standing inside just lifted it from spun around. The dollhouse was shut. Lock it. An exact replica of the one I'd found in my mother's old jewelry box. Sound came from the hallway. No footsteps. More like, walked toward the nursery. The door was cracked open. Something moved inside. I pushed it wider, just a few inches. The room was empty, but the dollhouse was open, and now there were 3 dolls inside. A third had appeared, standing in the tiny replica of the living room near the miniature red door. The third doll looked exactly like me. Same sweater, same hair. The morning light barely seeped through the curtains when I found the old leather-bound journal. It had been tucked away behind a loose floorboard in the living room, a secret left behind, waiting to be found. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed and fragile. No name, just a faded symbol embossed on the front. A small key entwined with a thorned vine. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart pounding as I opened it. The first entry was dated 6 years ago, the day my mother disappeared. They don't understand what's happening to us. I don't even fully understand, but I know this house is not what it seems. The handwriting was shaky, urgent as I read on. A story unfolded, one of fear, secrets, and a desperate attempt. To protect me, she wrote about the woman in blue, someone she called Leia, who had come into our lives before I was born, or so the words implied. Leia wasn't just a ghost or memory, she was something else. Something that could take forms, blend into the family, replace love with silence. I tried to hide. Anna. I hid her from Leia. But the house doesn't forget, and Leia never forgets. Tears blurred the ink as I flipped through the pages. There were sketches of the dollhouse with notes in the margins, cryptic warnings and pleas. The dolls are not toys, they are prison cells. Every night the door opens at 3:13. Every night the silence grows. My fingers trembled. Had the woman in blue ever been my mother? Or had Leia taken her place, trapping my real mother somewhere, maybe inside the dollhouse itself? I slammed the journal shut. The silence of the house pressed down on me, and from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The dollhouse door, slightly ajar again. 3 dolls still inside, and the third one, the one that looked like me, was now sitting watching. The night had crept in silently, cloaking the house in a thick, oppressive darkness. I lay in bed, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the ceiling that seemed to press down on me. The silence was shattered by a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A whisper. It wasn't just the wind, it was something else. Someone else. The whisper seemed to come from the very walls themselves, as if the house was alive, breathing secrets and shadows. I sat up, breath catching in my throat. The clock on the wall glowed faintly. 3:13 a.m., a cold shiver ran down my spine. The whisper grew louder, clearer, shaping into a single word. Anna. My name. The voice was barely audible, but unmistakable. I pressed my ear against the cold, wallpapered wall, trying to catch more. The walls seemed to pulse, the ancient runes on the faded wallpaper almost glowing faintly in the dark. I felt a magnetic pull toward a spot near the corner of the room. There, hidden behind torn and peeling wallpaper, was a small, rectangular outline. A secret panel I had never noticed before. My fingers trembled as I peeled back the fragile paper to reveal a hidden latch. With a soft click, the panel swung open, revealing a narrow, dust-choked cavity. Inside lay a battered, leather-bound album, its cover cracked and worn. I pulled it out carefully, dust swirling in the stale air opening. The album, my breath caught. The pages were filled with photographs, but not the ones I expected. Instead of pictures of my mother, there were images of the woman in the blue dress in one photo. She held a child's hand. My hand, unmistakably, but her eyes were cold, empty, almost void of life. Each photograph deepened the knot in my stomach. This woman was no stranger. She was part of my past, part of my family's dark secret. As I flipped through the last page, something slipped out. A small, crumpled note written in a shaky hand. Do not trust her. She will take you if you give her a chance. A wave of dread washed over me. The house seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing thicker, alive with unseen eyes. I realized I was not alone. The day was fading and long shadows stretched through the house, swallowing every corner in darkness. I clutched the leather-bound album and the note tightly, my mind racing through every revelation. The truth my family had buried for so long was finally surfacing, and it was far more sinister than I could have imagined. I stepped toward the mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, the one that had always been an ordinary object. But tonight it felt different, almost alive. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. The face looking back wasn't entirely mine in the glass. A woman in a faded blue dress stood behind me, her eyes cold and empty. She was the woman from the photographs, the one who had held my hand. The woman who was supposed to be my mother's shadow, but something darker. Her gaze pierced into my soul. A shudder ran through me. I realized this was no ordinary reflection. It was a gateway, a window to the past and to the secrets locked away deep within the house. Suddenly, a whisper echoed behind me, a voice both familiar and distant. You'll never know the truth unless you look inside yourself. I spun around, heart pounding, to find my real mother standing there. Her eyes were wet with sorrow and love, the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders. Leia, she said quietly, is a curse on our family. I fought it for years, but she's relentless. You are our last hope to end this. Tears blurred my vision, but a fierce determination took root in my heart. I had to confront Leia, to face the darkness that had claimed so many before me. I approached the mirror again, and this time the surface rippled like water, revealing a dark corridor beyond. The corridor beckoned, a path winding deep into the house's hidden past, into the core of the mystery that had haunted my family. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to uncover who I really was and what legacy I was meant to carry. As I crossed the threshold, the shadows closed behind me. In that darkness lay the answers. I saw the fate of us all.